Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. So we've taken a look at comparing the pandemic measures of France and Sweden with the UK. Now, time for Greece, and this one is particularly instructive. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, when it comes to lockdown measures, there's always a lot of talk about flattening the curve. Sometimes people refer to the national hat of Mexico for some reason. I mean, it's bad enough that people aren't buying their beer. Now they want to stomp up and down on their hats. It's really rather unfair. I don't know what they've done to deserve that. But Greece has certainly shown us how to do it. They went into full lockdown of the country, like many of their European counterparts. However, unlike many of them, they did it before dozens had already died from the virus. Now, they, again, were much behind the curve compared to some other countries, so they had more time to do this. But interestingly, and this is what makes the comparison quite tasty with the UK, happened at the same time. They went into lockdown basically the same time as the UK. They went into lockdown March the 23rd. I think that's when we were announcing it, and went into lockdown proper the next day. So, how are their measures different or the same? And what difference to the figures has it made? So in terms of the measures applied, from a distance, I'm at the other end of Europe, it looks very similar to the UK measures. The same basic reasons for leaving the house in the UK also applied to Greece. Although Greece made the use of forms, very similar to what I was talking about in France, and insisted that people carry ID with them. Now, the latter is not that realistic in the UK because we do not give citizens ID. If you happen to have ID in the UK, as many people will, it's for some other purpose. It's not just given to citizens. So you can't actually expect everyone to carry ID with them. That would definitely disadvantage the poor. Now, there appears to have been the closure of some parks in Greece, as well as outdoor exercise areas, unlike in the UK. So that's a bit of a difference, a little bit tighter there. There was also more coordinated help for those who had mobility or other issues that would have been a barrier to them getting by at this time. Now, there are some measures in the UK in place of that as well. It just seems less coordinated. It seems to be more up to volunteer groups with less of a lead being made by government on this. But just as in the UK, there have been a significant number of people ignoring the measures as well. I couldn't possibly comment on whether it's on the same scale. It's not going to be easy for either country to get anything other than anecdotal evidence for this. You can sort of see reports of it, but you're not exactly going to see it in data tables. So I can't really say whether it is, the civil disobedience on this front is the same in both countries. It just exists in both countries to the point where ministers are having to comment on it and threaten tighter measures. And then that is what's happening. Greece have talked about tightening the measures just as the UK have at pretty much the same point. Now, at the time that Greece imposed this lockdown, they had 15 deaths. When the UK imposed the same measures, we had 335. So Greece applied this lockdown very, very early. Since then, Greece's death toll has increased to 79, at the point at which I'm recording this anyway. For the UK, it's 5,373. Now, it'll have moved on in both countries when you're actually watching this, because it's likely to be a day later. But what we can see just from that, the point at which I'm doing this, in the just over 2 weeks of lockdown, Greece has experienced a 427% increase in the number of deaths, which on its own sounds quite frightening. It sounds like, you're not really controlling this at all. However, in that same period of time, in the UK, it's 1,504%. Now, let's not go mad about reading too much into a single statistic. It might be interesting for me to play about with some more numbers over this week and do it for a number of other countries that seem to be applying various measures. But that is certainly an indicator of how imposing lockdown measures early yields results. Because remember, the reason why we've applied these measures in the UK, much as the same as they did in Greece, was to rein in the increase in the number of deaths. So And we know it works. We know where it's worked in countries before. We've applied it as well. We're not exactly experimenting with this. So again, it stands to reason if you put the lockdown in place earlier, you'll gain the results. Experts had already been talking some time ago that for a week's delay in imposing these measures means the pandemic will be 3 times worse. We can sort of see that being reflected there, can't we? Now, is Greece therefore coming close to being out of the lockdown due to the success? No. And that should also be a cautionary tale for the UK and other countries as it happens. If anything, they are talking about tightening the restrictions, as I say, as people take the piss, just like in the UK. And all their curve is a lot shallower than in the UK. A 427% increase in number of deaths is still high. You know, as an isolated figure, you would look at that and go, oh my God, that's still rising quite steeply. Nothing like the level needed to even think about coming out of it. You have to have gone over the other side and it becoming down down to just a few deaths before you can even think about it. And even then, you'd have to then impose the sort of measures where you're tracking cases and keeping those people in quarantine even after that. Greece is following the same basic pattern as in other countries in imposing measures for a few weeks at a time and then reviewing it. So currently, as far as I can tell, the lockdown measures are going to be lasting until April the 27th, at which point they then review it again. I would think it's probably doubtful that they'll be eased at that point. It's likely to take some considerable time before the measures certainly before the measures are removed altogether, should we say, and life gets back to normal in Greece. And then you think to yourself, okay, and yet they're doing better with it than we are because they started early. Because they started early, we don't necessarily tie that to these slightly tighter measures, which may or may not be better in Greece. So how much longer will the UK have to try and maintain these harsh measures, having delayed for so long? And how will we maintain those measures when civil disorder begins to take its toll as people find themselves unable to cope with being locked inside their own homes for so long? We can see some of this in Italy. In Italy, where they've had a proper lockdown as well, a tighter lockdown in the UK, there have been cases of people just going mad. And this is why I don't think they'll really tighten the measures in the UK, because on the one hand, we have a government where the people in government really don't like this idea. They've really grown up with the concept that the government don't interfere in people's lives. So even these measures are very uncomfortable for their politics. To tighten them still further when it's not just about their politics being offended, but there is a practical consideration of just how tight can you maintain measures, particularly when you haven't got that many police, when people are going to bite back effectively if they perceive them to be too tight. So that's a serious issue there. And the fact that these measures would have to be in place for much longer in the UK because we waited so much longer before applying them. But there it is. Greece's actual measures seem very similar to the UK's, a little bit tighter in some ways, but they applied it when just over a dozen had died as opposed to several hundred. Now, that is not to say that Greece are getting everything right in terms of handling this pandemic, however. We'll just leave you the final point that experts say lockdowns alone will not beat it, that amongst other things you have to test and test again, and Greece are not doing that. In fact, proportionally, they've tested fewer people than even the UK have, and the UK are not testing enough either. So there you are. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.